I've got my notes, so I'm going to sort of move around, but be where I can catch my notes. I have been around Athens for a long time. I'm 56. I was born here, raised in 5 Points. My wife Mary and I have been married for about 26 years. We have 3 sons, one who just graduated UGA, and then 2 at Georgia Tech, down 316. Let's see, this is a Republican primary, so what we're all going to say, first of all, is I've been working since I was about 10 years old. I had a paper route. I threw the Athens Banner Herald around 5 Points, which was a great job and a great learning experience, back when a $5 bill meant something. And then I bagged groceries at Kroger, and I tore tickets at Beechwood Cinema, just all the sort of 5 Points jobs you can have along the way, heading toward law school. I have been an attorney for 32 years. I was a little surprised and saddened when I figured that out. And that's an awful long time to be an attorney. Around Athens, we build some rental properties. We do some development and a little grading, just all the sort of capitalist things that you would hope somebody's working on to understand what small businesses are and how they operate. I was in the Georgia House of Representatives for 6 years, 4 as a Democrat and 2 as a Republican. And that's a funny story. I'll get to that in just a minute. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak here this evening, and I'll tell you specifically why. This is going to be a crazy cycle. I mean, every contest up and down the ballot has multiple candidates, almost all of them more than 2. So there's going to be runoffs. And the opportunity to just get in front of people and talk and kind of give them an opportunity to know you and your backstory a little bit, I think is important. So I do appreciate this opportunity. We have 3 people in my race for Bill Cowsard's seat. He decided to run for Attorney General, and we've already got disruptors showing up, even in the local races. We had a big deal guy show up for governor, and we've got somebody now challenging our local congressman, or would-be congressman. And so there's just going to be a lot of candidates vying for your attention and for your vote. And they're all going to say exactly the same thing when they stand up here. They're going to say, I've had a job since I was 10. I bagged groceries, or I had a paper route, or I worked at a cinema. Because that's what we do. We run small businesses, and generally speaking, those of us that are in the room are going to have been entrepreneurial sort of from the start. And so I appreciate the opportunity specifically to give you a little bit of background on me, because I am a voter, but if I were a voter sitting there saying, well, there's going to be 50 people, what am I going to learn about? And most importantly, why should I vote for you? And that's really the question. That's what we all want to say is, please vote for me. And I had a job forever, and I'm local, and I'm conservative. Well, I've got more than that. So why would you vote for Doug? Well, to start with, I have sort of I don't know if it's fame or infamy, of being one of the few people ever to have been defeated by crossover votes, right? Everybody loves to talk about crossover voting and the idea that at any given time, Democrats could all go pull a Republican ballot and vote and control an election. And that happened to me. It's really rare. If you talk to political scientists, professors over here, or if you talk to political consultants, they'll say, look, that's a 1 in a million shot. It never happens. It can happen. And let me tell you, this is how it happened. And with the pollen coming, I'm going to go hoarse before this is over. I wrote and passed historic legislation in Georgia ending barbaric late-term abortions. So I'll set the stage for you. It's back in 2009, and I had been a Democrat in the House of Representatives for about 2.5 sessions. And one day I was sitting in my seat on the House floor, and a friend of mine, Tom, who's my seatmate, sits right behind me, a Republican. Every Wednesday he would go up to the well, and he would say, hey, tomorrow morning we're going to have our legislative prayer meeting. Every Wednesday for 2.5 years. And for some reason, and I mean, I'm sure people here understand, I knew that day I absolutely had to go. I don't know why I had to go, but I knew that the next day at 7 o'clock I needed to be at the legislative prayer meeting. And so I went. And I walked into this little room in the basement of the Capitol, and here's Bill Cowser, who I've been trying cases against for 25 years, Ralph Hudgens, who ended up being, Commissioner of Insurance, Doug Collins, who's now our Secretary of the VA, and everybody was thrilled. Everybody got up, glad-handing me, happy to see me. Funny story, the first time I ran for the legislature, I ran against Ralph Hudgens. And I took him to 49-51, and he won. And then about a year later, he hired me as his attorney. And I've been his attorney ever since. I'm not sure whether he thought I was a good attorney or he just didn't want to mess with me anymore in politics. But I've been representing Ralph for 25 years now, and Suzanne. And so I said, wow, this is a friendly group. Everybody's so nice. And they were like, we've never had a Democrat here before. We're just kind of thrilled that you're here. And I said, well, I don't know why, but I knew I needed to come. And so it was great. Every Thursday I went and we prayed for each other, and we prayed for health, and we prayed for our families, and we prayed, for strength and guidance. And it was an amazing experience. And what I didn't realize at the time is I think those guys were really good at praying, because I'm pretty sure they prayed me right into the Republican Party. and I started, saying, well, this is great, what are we doing? And I went back home for the break, and we came back to the next session, and I just knew it wasn't right, and I knew it wasn't right for me. And I sort of famously or infamously, either way, switched parties at that time. Now, it's important to remember that in Georgia, we never elected a Republican majority. We switched a Republican majority. I was a Republican long before Donald Trump. I switched at a younger age than Sonny Perdue and Nathan Deal and Ronald Reagan and Winston Churchill, for that matter. When I started to look up who switched parties, you wouldn't think, but there it is, Winston Churchill as well. So, I left the Democratic Party and I became a Republican, and I immediately got great committee assignments. I ended up being the Secretary or Vice Chair of Reapportionment at the time, which we were just getting into, how to redraw the lines, and I wasn't quite comfortable in my own skin yet, and so I went to Doug Collins, who, in addition to being a housemate with me, was a chaplain in the Army Reserve. And I said, Doug, what am I doing here? What's the goal? What's the plan? And he looked at me and he said, I know what the plan is. And he was certain of it. And I went, this is great. Somebody knows the plan. And he said, last year I carried what's called the fetal pain bill, which puts an end to late-term abortions. Any abortion past 22 weeks is outlawed. And he said, and you wouldn't think it, but right now we have no limit on abortion in Georgia. It was like Virginia. You could go all the way to the last day. And he said, I got blowback from, of course, Stacey Abrams and the Democrats, but he got blowback from his own party, from sort of do-nothing Republicans who just didn't want a hard fight and didn't want to take a hard vote. And he said, I think that's why you're here. He's like, you're a lawyer, you do constitutional law, you can study the medicine, you can explain why Roe v. Wade is a bad standard, and I think you can make some real change in Georgia. And so we did it. We did dozens and dozens of committee meetings through the process. It's a hateful bunch. When you sort of go to the Super Bowl of legislation, which is a pro-life bill, people were screaming at me in the halls. People online were wishing that my wife gets gang raped. And let me tell you, when you get married at 20-something, that's not part of the deal. I'm like, baby, how are we doing here? And she looked at me and she said, I will handle this, you go pass that bill. And so we kept going and became the Democrats' target. Target not only during the session, but then after the session as well. We worked together with the Georgia Right to Life and the Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. And those folks love some babies. And they had their ideas about what should be in the bill. Bill Cowser agreed to carry it in the Senate. And the Senate had some ideas about what should be in that bill as well. So On the last day, in the last quarter hour, Bill and I hammered out the language, took it back to our respective chambers, and got it passed. Thank you. I'm proud of it. And it was worth it. You know, that's what they say. At the end of the day, the Democrats then came out and said, we're making Doug McKillip our #1 target statewide to get him unelected. That is our goal. We don't want him being effective as a conservative in the legislature anymore. We don't want him carrying good conservative legislation. They started giving classes called How to Defeat Doug McKillip, which, okay, you know, a little badge of honor there. I'm like, okay, I'm #1 at something. And so they got about 1,500 Republicans in Clark and Oconee County Democrats to say they were Republican and go and pull a Republican ballot just to vote against my opponent. They spent tens of thousands of dollars to defeat me, and it worked. And you know, they sent me home, and I would do it all again. One thing that you realize is that if you're doing something that's important or meaningful, people are going to be against you. And they were, and they still are, to a great extent. And so the first reason I would ask for people to vote for me is you want to have a legislator who is willing to lose his or her seat for principles, for good, solid, conservative agendas. You have to make hard votes. You have to do things where the other side is going to be upset. If you just want to get elected so that you can go and eat steaks and talk to lobbyists and keep a chair warm, there is plenty of that in Atlanta. They're everywhere. They don't want to take hard votes because then they say, well, I don't want to upset people. You know, I'm in a 55-45 district. You shouldn't even be there. If that's your concern, you should find another vocation. That's #1. #2 is just practical. I've been an attorney for 32 years. I've spent 6 years actually writing, editing, and passing laws. I have the experience to do the job. I like to think I'm pretty good at it, having passed a pro-life bill and gotten it signed by Nathan Deal. Not a lot of people who stand up here are going to be able to say that they have that experience. And I kind of liken it to, if you're going to hire somebody to drive a tractor, you probably want to hire somebody that's driven a tractor before, not their first day. So on day 1, I will be able to be an effective senator for the 46th district. I know, you know, how to do the job. I know Robert's rules already. I am possessed of all the skills necessary to do it. The third reason I'm going to give you is, and this is a tricky one, money. There's just way too much money in politics. I think probably everybody would agree. The fact is, politicians are seen as working for no one other than high-dollar donors and lobbyists and corporations. And I see people nodding in the crowd, both in D.C. and in Atlanta. You know, if you have to, I'm sorry, I heard somebody say something. Yes. If you have to call your 5 biggest donors to see how you feel about an issue, you shouldn't be there. You should be able to say, is this good, solid, conservative legislation that I want to be for or against? And then you should be able to vote for it. But if you have to stick your finger and see which way the wind is blowing or see which way your high dollar guys want you to go, you shouldn't be there. That's why when I decided to run for Calzert's seat, when he announced, I looked at Mary and I said, we're self-funding this one. We're not going to take a dime from anybody. We are going to be the people's voice. The only thing I'm going to ask from anybody is their vote. That way, everybody in the room, anyone who votes for me knows there's not someone standing in line in front of you. There's nobody who gave me a bunch of money, no corporation that's going to be looking for a tax break. Nobody who's, and I love these, everybody knows the euphemisms. Candidates can stand here and say everything they want, but then when they get to Atlanta and the lobbyists come and go, hey, you remember those 10 guys that I got to give you $2,500 a piece? They really want this. And it turns out to be something that's going to, gut the Okefenokee swamp or let them drill for chemicals or build another data center somewhere that we don't really need and can't afford. And don't want to pay the electricity for. And so, some of these guys' views will evolve on some of these issues, or they'll get to Atlanta and take a deeper look at what's going on. I just don't, I'm done with that kind of politician, and I won't be that, and I don't think I want that to be my senator. The other thing is, you don't want somebody who needs the paycheck. If feeding your kids depends on getting the 40 grand from the Senate, you shouldn't be there. You should be focusing on your business. Like, people ask me, well, what have you been doing since 2012? My answer is capitalism. It's what we all do every day. And it turns out that just simply buy low, sell high works real well. Stick with that. And at the end of the day, I've told people I'm going to donate my salary to local charities. I don't need it. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to be bought and paid for like a lot of the guys down there who are just scared. And that's just the reality is they're afraid to take a stance on something because they got to have that check, or they're just desperate to get reelected. Either way, they can't be independent, and then they start to compromise their principles. Let's see, I've got a couple more points, but I want to leave some time for questions. Government's simply too big. I've got a whole paragraph on it, but I bet you get the gist of it. I had this, let's play a game. What are they going to call me? Right? Because I got called a lot of names along the way. And so I want some constitutional amendments to Democrat-proof Georgia. And whether they pass or not, let's put them on the board and make them vote so that we can show where people really stand on the issues. For instance, no DEI hiring. Merit-based hiring only, period. What will they call me? They'll call me a racist. I mean, here it comes. Just get ready for it. If you can't stand in the halls and be called a racist and ignore them, you have no business being there. It's not for nice people. It's for hardened people who can take the hits. No secondary or non-Western form of government can be tolerated, right? So you've already got Sharia. You've already got Sharia law tribunals and sessions in Greece and some in the UK. And right now they're deemed voluntary, but the local courts will then sometimes adopt their findings. And so what you're starting to see is the Western Judeo-Christian form of tradition and heritage in government and lawmaking being supplanted by different cultures and religions. And so I'm gonna be what? An Islamophobe, which is not a real word. Right? A phobia is something that's an irrational fear.
That's right.
Right? If you're worried about Islam, I'm not sure it's irrational. No sanctuary cities, and this is important in Athens. No sanctuary policies.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because every city will say, "Oh, we're not a sanctuary city," because they didn't pass an ordinance. A resolution saying we are a sanctuary city. I mean, they do in Oregon and Washington and nutball states, but not here. Here, they just implement policies that are sanctuary policies.
Right.
Every form of government, county, state, municipal, everybody must cooperate with federal agencies to enforce the Constitution. Because why? Because you all took an oath to do it. Just like I would take an oath to do it. And that's the point at which we have to try and correct the problems Joe Biden gave us for 4 years. And so no non-Western forms of government, tribunals, nothing that will interact or interfere or even modify or affect our Judeo-Christian heritage, courts, legislatures. Fourth, and this one's easy, no men in girls' locker rooms. Let's put it in the Constitution. Let's make them vote on it. It's an 80-20 issue, even in a general.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just silliness, but they're doing it. They're doing it in Washington and San Francisco and California and Oregon. And at the end of the day, we have to protect women's private places. We have to protect their sports, and we just cannot have men in women's sports. And then finally, we have to put in the Constitution that they can't decriminalize drugs. I mean, in Athens particularly, we had Deborah Gonzalez, who her first day in office sent out this manifesto of what she won't be prosecuting.
Yeah.
So she immediately, in one fell swoop, supplanted both the legislative and executive branches with her own idea of what is and isn't the law. and thank God we're done with her. But we should go ahead and say, look, you don't get to choose. You are the enforcement agency. We're not going to start, decriminalizing fentanyl or whatever else. You have to abide by the law, follow the law, and arrest people. Last thing, I saw actually a Facebook post from y'all, from Athens Clarke County Republican Party, saying that we needed to be rid of Melissa Link. Now, let me tell you how to do that, because I did it. When I was in the legislature, I was secretary chairman of the redistricting committee. And I redrew the lines for Clarke County at that time to provide for at least 2 or 3 more conservative districts to try to get some kind of conservative representation on the commission. That's coming up again in 4 years. You simply draw people out, and yeah, everyone is going to be mad. That's okay. They were mad before, they'll be mad again. But you draw them into districts together so they both can't run. You draw people out of their own district so that you just got to create some kind of parity in Athens. I mean, we've got 40% Republicans and 0 real conservative presence on the commission. All right. I sure do appreciate your time. I tried to get through it all reasonably quickly to respect your time. I am happy to take some questions.
2 questions. If anybody has a question for Doug? John.
Question. You said you were a Democrat, and then you went to a prayer meeting, a couple prayer meetings, you became a Republican. It was more than that. What did you get from the Republicans that said, hey, I really should be one?
Well, it was a lot more than that. It was a lot of meetings. I mean, I went for a whole year. But at the end of the day, rock solid, conservative, small government approach to everything is the right approach. When I was in the House of Representatives from 2007 to 12, it was the Great Recession. We cut $3 billion out of an $18 billion budget. And yeah, nobody was particularly happy with it. But we made government super, super efficient, and we are still riding that efficiency today. It's growing out of control again. We need to start reining it in, but it's just better policies, it's better approach to things. It's not, let me take your money and give it to these people, even though they're deserving and we're all tolerant and we love everyone. You just can't start redistributing wealth. Look at what's happening in New York. They are on the track to disaster. They're going to lose all of their high dollar earners to Florida and hopefully Georgia. And it will be a nightmare. So you just got to stick with what got us here, right? Capitalism is the single greatest political system to raise people out of poverty, and merit-based capitalism is what we have to continue to go with, and that's pure Republican. Yes?
Yeah, I'm sorry about what happened to you with your primary and how the Democrats crossed over, but I disagree with you that it's uncommon. I think they now know the playbook, and I'm already seeing people, and I forget which candidate they're going to try and defeat. Would you be in favor if you get elected closing our primary?
That is an interesting question, and maybe it was uncommon at the time it happened to me. So I will correct that. If they're doing it more and more, maybe the how to defeat Doug McKillip playbook is being implemented throughout the state. I don't know about a closed primary system, and I'll just be honest, I would have to study that, and that's not my view is going to evolve. I haven't studied enough about it to give you an answer.
And the word always is, Kemp will never approve that. Well, you won't have to worry about that if Kemp is no longer the governor.
Yeah, he's done.
So I would like to see that.
Okay, I'll be happy to look into it. And like I said, I'll just be honest when I answer questions. If I haven't looked at something, I'll simply tell you I haven't looked at it. It's not that I have to call my big donors and find out about it. I'm just not educated enough about that. And it's a great question. I apologize for not being more up on it.